Good afternoon. I'm Mark Bredveld, and I'm going to read a letter that I sent and put up on Facebook a little while ago, but well worthwhile to put up on YouTube as well, I think. It's an open letter to our Prime Minister, current members of Parliament, and the minor political parties, and to all New Zealanders. It's concerning legislation regarding unborn children of New Zealand. And this is the letter. Dear Prime Minister Ms Ardern and members of Parliament, thank you for all your input into legislation that affects us all in New Zealand. In particular, our thanks, Prime Minister, on the compassion you showed in the handling of the mosque shootings in Christchurch. You appeared to show real grace and concern, as we all ought to do, in weeping with those who weep. Therefore, it disturbs me deeply that this same concern has not been extended to our youngest and most vulnerable New Zealanders. Rather, their lives have further been put into jeopardy by legislation pushed through Parliament in haste and under cover of the COVID-19 lockdown. And not just any legislation. Rather, we now have abortion being made available right up until birth, if 2 doctors give the go-ahead. Hence, we're in a situation where all that is needed is for the abortion providers to find 2 doctors who are willing to sign off on most or all of late-term abortion requests, and we have what amounts to abortion on demand, right up until birth. This is not just disturbing, it is totally and absolutely wicked and evil. I have 5 children of my own, and remember well the joy of feeling for the first time at around 18 weeks this precious little baby kicking inside her mum. What a joy, knowing that this little one was made in the image of God, and because of this is of immeasurable value to him. We all know very well that these little ones are fully human. They move around, they sleep, they wake, suck their thumb, have hiccups, get startled by sudden noise, they turn somersaults, they can even hear their mother talk and will recognise the father's voice or a song sung by Dad. They can open and close their eyes and even cry in their own way while still in the womb. By nature, we all know the preciousness of human life. For example, almost all of us would do our utmost to save a person who's drowning, or a child from getting run over by a car. How is it then that we have come to a place where we have dehumanised the most vulnerable of our New Zealand people? When abortion was first introduced into New Zealand, those of us around at that time were horrified that anyone would want to kill their little one, and strongly objected to the procedure for any reason other than immediate physical danger to the mother. For my part, the destruction of so many innocents every year has been a source of grief and inner turmoil for a long time. I've voted for parties that have opposed abortion for more than 30 years now. I can imagine when William Wilberforce first began his fight in 1787 for the rights of slaves and an end to the slave trade in Britain. The grief and frustration he must have felt at that time. It took 20 years before legislation was passed in 1807, which outlawed the slave trade, and a further 26 years until the abolition of slavery itself in Britain in 1833. Abortion, in my estimation, is worse than slavery. Why? Because it is done for one reason: to end the life of a child. Slaves, at least, were allowed to live. The arguments and actions of the pro-slavery faction 200 or more years ago is very similar to that of the pro-abortion faction today. What they said then was that men and women of African descent possessed lesser mental capabilities and a lesser level of civilization, so should not have the same rights as civilized people, and that other nations would continue to trade in slaves regardless of Britain abolishing her role in the international trade. They even said that blacks were better off as slaves than if they were left in their own country. Isn't this exactly the same with the arguments around abortion? We're told that the unborn child is less than human, that they're better off dead than unwanted, even though every child is wanted by someone, especially by couples who have not been able to have children of their own. Further, that if they don't allow abortion here in New Zealand, the rest of the world will continue with it anyway. They're all poor arguments. As I said, to me, abortion is the new slavery, really. It's actually the new slavery. It's something every right-thinking New Zealander must oppose, especially this new law that has been passed through Parliament during the lockdown. My call is to all of you in Parliament right now. Do not let this new law stand. Prime Minister, I'm asking you to take a stand against it, just as William Wilberforce did against slavery. Build a genuine legacy for yourself as one who stands for truth and justice for all New Zealanders, including the most vulnerable. Members of Parliament and the Labour, National, ACT and Green parties, I call upon you to represent us ordinary New Zealanders and repeal this terrible piece of legislation. And truth be known, if your leaders refuse to do so, follow your conscience and resign from your party. Stand with us ordinary New Zealanders as independent candidates to fight for our youngest, who, like the slaves 200 years ago, have no voice. So I call upon the minor parties also, maybe those who didn't make it into Parliament, to make this your primary issue, the major point of difference, should we see no change to this appalling law during the current term of government. We need all of you who are willing to take a stand for the precious lives of the unborn to come with a united voice against it. So I'm calling upon all New Zealanders to join me. Now is the time for action. Too long we've quietly acquiesced as we've seen more and more laws introduced that we absolutely have not agreed with. Let this be the place where we take our stand and say to our politicians, you've gone too far. Right now, we cannot and must not allow our politicians to take our country down a road that we all know is completely anti-God, anti-life, anti-conscience, and dehumanising, completely wicked. We, the majority of people in New Zealand, reject this nasty piece of legislation and call upon our government to repeal it immediately. I call upon all New Zealanders to join with me, should there be no change of heart from our politicians, and I hope there is, but to commit to voting for a party in the future which fully commits to repealing this legislation, one that genuinely represents the will of the people of New Zealand. Will you join me? Will you commit to joining me for this vital cause? Let our politicians know that you are against it. Let them know that we stand for the lives of all New Zealanders, young and old. And may we truly say and truly believe in our hearts when we sing our national anthem, God defend our free land. And may God defend every person, including the unborn, all those who live here. Amen.